Yes.
This is Miriam Raftery, host of the East County Magazine radio show on KNSJ 89.1 FM Descanso. Today, my very special guests are Barry Jantz and Elizabeth Urquhart, leaders in the Stop Cottonwood Sand Mine, a citizens organization that is opposed to the proposed sand mining project along the Sweetwater River at the Cottonwood Golf Course site. Barry and Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Miriam.
Well, now, for those who are not familiar with this project, can you start by describing the scope of exactly what's proposed? You know, how many acres would be mined, how many tons of sand, and over what time period?
Elizabeth, you want to take that one?
Sure, and you can help me with the details, Barry.
Sure.
The proposal involves mining 251 acres on a property that is 280 acres. So it really will be the full length of both golf courses where the sand mining will occur, and it will occur in 4 different phases. So it'll be about 20 to 30 acres at a time that they're mining, and then they'll move to the next phase until they complete it in 10 to 12 years. And then the proposal is to reclaim the property and sort of try to put it back together again.
Okay, but for 10 years at least, things would be disrupted. Now, the draft environmental impact report has just been released by the County of San Diego, and the public has until February 14th at 4 p.m. to submit their comments. There are also 2 public meetings coming up. Can one of you please provide details on how the review process works and how and where the public can weigh in?
Sure. So this is a draft environmental impact report. And the purpose of the environmental impact report is to really inform the public about what the developer plans to do to mitigate environmental impacts as a result of the project. And so there's a 60-day process for the public to respond to this draft. And that's what we're in right now. So the February 14th date you mentioned, I believe, is the end of the 60 days. So there are a couple of meetings, public meetings. People can also send a comment anytime in writing now without attending a public meeting, but we'd certainly encourage people to be involved in the public meetings. And one of them is in person, and that is Wednesday, January 12th, from 7 to 9:30 p.m. at Hillsdale Middle School. And that's 1301 Brabham Street in El Cajon. We're also going to give our contact information. So if anybody needs, details or wants an email, describing this information, we can do that. But that's the in-person meeting. And then there's an online phone-in public meeting or teleconference. And that's Wednesday, January 19th from 7 to 9:30 p.m. And there is a web link for that, which we can provide. There's also a phone number, but I think, the best thing is if we give our contact information, if people want to reach out to us, so we can provide these details. And we can also provide the details on if people really can't attend a public meeting. Again, we encourage it, but if for some reason people can't, we'd certainly encourage people to comment on the project and what they view as the impacts of the project at a place we email address for.
And what is your website for your organization where people can find all of those links and all of that information, which we will also post in an article on our site at eastcountymagazine.org. But is it Stop Cottonwood?
It's Stop Cottonwood Sand Mine. So all of that, stopcottonwoodsandmine.org.
Yeah, that's an easy one to remember, Barry.
That's the email address. That's the website. And then the email is info@stopcottonwoodsandmine.org. Okay,
very good. And the links there for how people can file comments with the county are all listed. Now, the developer is New West Investments, which is owned by Michael Schlesinger, who has, I understand, a history of converting golf courses into housing. This time he's going for a sand mine instead. But the developer would argue that the sand is needed for road building and other construction projects so that, builders in our area or the county do not need to import sand for other from other regions. Now, interestingly, in San Diego County, developers actually pay for their own environmental impact reports, and they even choose who will write the report. It's a process that critics have said on past projects can tend to lead to a minimizing of some serious environmental impacts. So it's really important, folks, for the public to take a good close look at these documents and point out anything that might be inaccurate or have been omitted. Now, understandably, it's a big, complex document, and I know neither of you have had time to read all of it and fully assess it all. But can each of you please share at least a few of your biggest concerns about the Cottonwood sand mining project? Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
Sure. I have had an opportunity to go through the entire document, but not every single appendix. There really are thousands of pages that are involved in an environmental impact report. And I do understand that the professionals that are hired to write the reports, the required reports, are professionals, of course, and they have to be approved by the county. And the person who writes the environmental impact report and talks about the reports really can pick and choose the pieces that they want out of the reports. So that's the part we really have to take a look at, because it's important for us to go to those exact reports and see if it really matches with what the person, the author of the environmental impact report, is saying. It's important for us to reach out to experts that we know in the community and across San Diego to assist us with responding to the EIR. Some of us have a little experience in doing this, but not in all of the different parts. So that's why it's so crucial. I took a deep dive into the aesthetic part of the EIR. And that is the one part that the report has come out and said there are going to be significant impacts to the aesthetics, what everything is going to look like to the public.
Yeah, astoundingly, that was the only thing that they said was a significant, unmitigatable impact,
Right.
Not impact on wildlife in the adjacent wildlife preserve, water quality, air quality, impacts on residents, traffic, potentially wildfire issues. No, none of that. None of that. The only thing they found to be unmitigatable was the view, what you would be looking at. What do you think about that? I know you've called this a flawed project, but tell us why.
Well, I think it is flawed because that is the only area that they're saying is that they can't mitigate is the aesthetics. And yet I believe, and many of us believe, that there are many, and you listed them very well in terms of the biological impact, cultural, the noise is going to be huge, never mind the traffic. And there are pieces that they say they can mitigate, but they can't mitigate all of it. And even the pieces that they say they can mitigate, if you look really deeply into it, they don't point out the proof of why they think, something could be mitigated. For instance, the noise. We're in a valley and they're talking about putting up 8-foot, maybe 12-foot barriers that are going to, keep the sound from residences that are as close as 400 feet. But our residents live, on all different elevations around the valley and the Sweetwater River. So it makes sense that, a 8-foot barrier is going to do that. And it's going to move as they move the sand mining across, their property. It's not going to mitigate any of the hauling trucks. And we're going to have a hauling truck going by one every 2 minutes.
Wow. Every 2 minutes for 10 years, basically. What, 5 days a week, 6 days a week?
Monday through Friday. And they're going to be doing that from, I believe, 9:30 to 9 to 3:30 every day. And they're going to start at 7 a.m. in terms of actually processing the sand. So we're going to hear and they're using very large equipment on this project.
Barry, let's hear from you. What are a couple of your major concerns as someone who lives not far from here?
Yeah. So, and I've dug into the land use and planning portions of the document. And this all goes back to some requirements within the county of San Diego, and they come under the county general plan. The Valley de Oro, this is within the Valley de Oro Community Planning Group, so it's in the Valley de Oro plan, and also the county zoning ordinance. And all of those documents refer to protection against incompatible land uses, and that projects must be compatible with the character of unincorporated communities. And the Valley de Oro plan really gets into that, because in this case, the community plan for Valley de Oro wants to retain a unique balance of urban, semi-rural, agriculture, and open space land uses. New development within the communities to conserve natural resources and topography and provide a pleasant, safe environment for community residents. Okay, so those are the underlying themes within the county requirements. So as I look at the land use and planning pieces of this document, what I really see is the whoever wrote the report very minimally says, okay, that's why there's no significant impacts, because we meet all these requirements. Why? Because we're going to have a major use permit for a time, and then we're going to put everything back, and it's going to be more beautiful than it was before. So what it doesn't take into account here is that we're not talking about an 18-month project or even a 2-year project. We're really talking about 10 years of mining, 2 years of reclamation, and then there's even an added time element for the reclamation for growth to come back to where it was, and they're putting 5 to 7 years on that. So if this was 18 months or 2 years, I think you could, doing the minimal work they have, maybe make some arguments that you're compatible, because it's only a minor impact to folks over a short time is what they'd argue. But this is for minimal of 10 years, 2 years after that, and then even some additional time. That's without getting into any delay. And that's why I think the document is flawed. It doesn't get into the significance of the overall time. If someone has a child going into kindergarten at the beginning of this, when it's done, that child's going to be away at college.
Yeah, and there are schools and businesses near this also, right? Tell us a little bit about the neighborhood and what's immediately nearby.
Well,
Yes,
Hammersmith Elementary School is 1/4 mile from the property. It's very close, and adjacent to that is a very large park that a lot of residents use and sports teams use on weekends. And so that's very, very close in terms of daily, Monday through Friday, daily processing of sand that has, truly the ability to cause valley fever, asthma, other respiratory diseases. And it'll be very sensitive to people who already are experiencing those kinds of, concerns and diseases. They'll be more susceptible to having problems with the silica in the sand.
And I think illustrating the absurdity of this EIR, that really, I think, is one of the cites the least impacts of just about anything I've ever read for any major project. They even say it wouldn't impact recreation when they're eliminating a golf course. And I might add,
and that's a definite part of the land use element, is that it is zoned for recreation use. And so again, the purpose of a major use permit is without having to do a rezone, is to say, hey, we're going to cause a major use other than what is typically allowed in this area. But is that really for 10 or 12 years? I don't think that's makes it compatible, going back to those county documents, compatible with the existing land uses. And Elizabeth mentioned there's homes, within 400 feet. These homes are adjacent. Many of these homes are directly adjacent to the project site. In other words, they have a back fence on the project site.
Well, and it's fine to talk about restoring in 10 years, but if the noise and pollution and so forth scares away or kills off threatened and endangered species, it might not be so easy to bring those back.
Well, they believe they're going to mitigate that by, if they're going to be within 400 or 500 feet of nesting endangered birds, then they'll, move back and try to, make sure they're not close to the extent feasible. And that's a phrase that's used a great deal in the document, to the extent feasible, which really doesn't tell us anything.
No.
And they're going to do whatever the heck they want, without regard to any of the biological impact.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning too that the open space at the golf course and those large ponds that they've had out there were long used by wildlife. I know I've had readers send me photos of deer on the, grazing on the grass there, and the groundskeepers would tell me they would regularly see mountain lions in the evening out there. So now that water source is going away, and I haven't seen anything about replacing it. What about fire danger? Do you believe that the project could increase either the danger of fires or make it more difficult for existing residents to evacuate due to the increased traffic?
So Elizabeth, I don't know if you even, because we're trying to wade through this document at this point, of course.
Yeah.
And we've got different people taking different pieces. I mean, I looked at the part I read, which is land use and planning, does get into some traffic. I noticed, there's an additional turn lanes going to be placed at the existing entrance, and then there's going to be another turn area installed along Willow Glen where one isn't now. Those will have turn lanes, but with the trucks coming in and out, I don't think there's any, that's a busy road as it is. I don't think there's any guarantee that turn lanes, are going to be a full mitigation of the traffic concerns resulting from these trucks, running regularly, between 9 and 3 or whatever it is, Monday through Friday. So yeah. There can be traffic, especially as we approach the Steel Canyon Bridge and people trying to turn onto that and get off of that, especially when school's going in and out, things like that. There's traffic already. So as soon as you have an emergency or you've got a fire or someone with any kind of heart situation, there needs to be paramedics responding, fire risk, whatever it is,
it can be
there's
slowed.
definitely potential for delays. And
Right. And we know if
concern.
an ambulance doesn't get there within 8 minutes, if someone is having a heart attack or isn't breathing, it can literally be a life or death issue. So every minute counts.
In addition to the 176 trips that large trucks are going to make, so 88 round trips of large trucks per day, they're going to have up to 18 large hauling trucks just lined up on Willow Glen Drive. They're going to create this kind of, as Barry already mentioned, a right of way into their parking lot. But these trucks need to be lined up on the road, ready for, picking up the sand and then hauling it back down Willow Glen. So it's not just the trucks going back and forth, but they're going to be on the road even. And so I think that certainly will cause a problem in terms of the regular traffic. And, interestingly, the thing they talk about traffic is, it's still right now, Willow Glen and Steel Canyon are very busy. So with us adding these number of trips, even with large trucks, it really won't impact it much, which I think is really quite.
Yeah. I mean, one way of really looking at it, and maybe you really need to know the area, but these trucks, as they leave the site, both at the existing entrance, which is kind of the entrance to the golf course now, and then the added entrance they're going to put on Willow Glen, these trucks are going to be making left-hand turns out of the site. Do you know what a big truck is like turning out of a site? It doesn't go quickly.
Slow.
It's not like when you step on your gas because you got to get across. These are, so this is going to halt traffic in both directions several times an hour. And so I just don't see how that can really mitigate with by the traffic review they've done.
Yeah, how can you possibly say that has no significant impact? It's astounding. Elizabeth, you have said that these shortcomings should be addressed, that you've called it an incomplete draft environmental impact report, and that it should be reissued to the public to review. In other words, basically, they need to do it over again
Right.
before a major use permit could be issued.
Right. I mean, it's only fair to all of us and to the public to truly understand, the comprehensiveness of this project and the true impacts, not just to us, but to our roads and to, our plants and our animals. They really have glossed over it, and they haven't, they're not telling us the truth, what really can happen in terms of sand mines. There isn't anywhere that we asked the developer at, they had done a presentation at the Validate Oral Community Planning Group when we were first talking about this in 2018.
Yeah.
And they were asked, can you tell us and show us another community where there is a similar sand mine, a similar industrial, project like this in the middle of a developed residential area with businesses and homes and schools, senior centers, so that we can understand, how did they do it?
Good
And
question.
what were the benefits for that community and how did it turn out? And they couldn't name one at all in California.
Wow.
That says something. It's inappropriate. And Barry, you've always said this, that yes, we understand the need for sand. We need it to make concrete, but this is an inappropriate location. It isn't compatible with the uses that are currently occurring in Rancho San Diego. And that's clearly it. We need to find another place.
So
Yeah,
what
and
kind
that,
of,
and to make it clear, I mean, for anybody who may be wondering, this isn't the kind of sand you just go get at the beach or at the desert, right? Let's acknowledge that this is a different kind of sand that is used in aggregate construction. I don't think there's any question it's needed. But just because something's needed doesn't mean it's appropriate to mine it anywhere. Okay, and that's where we have to say it's just inappropriate and incompatible with the existing neighborhoods. It's surrounded by businesses, schools, residents, and that's really why we're opposed to this.
So what kind of experts is your organization, Stop Cottonwood Sand Mine, hiring to research in this draft EIR? And what other help, if any, do you need other experts you're still looking for, in case we've got a listener or viewer out there?
I'm going to let Elizabeth's probably very versed right now in where we have people reviewing the document, where we still have some needs. But I just want to make sure hiring should be a very loose term. This is all volunteers right now. This is all volunteers. We're doing this voluntarily. So hiring is people who are going to get a cup of coffee from me at some point, maybe. But go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, you said that well. I mean, down the road, if necessary, we may have to do that. We may have to fundraise and hire experts. But fortunately, right now, we know people that are experts, and people are sort of coming out of the woodwork and offering their assistance. And we do have the Sierra Club has experts that are working on review. The Audubon Society is reviewing in depth the document. So they'll be looking at the biological aspects. The Sierra Club will be looking at the environmental aspects. We have a hydrologist engineer who's looking at the water pieces. Mm-hmm. We also have a couple of folks who are in construction project management, specifically around environmental uses. And so they have been taking a look at it around the construction pieces. There's so many different aspects to this.
Do you have a wildlife biologist? You mentioned the Audubon, but for the non-birds, the mammals and the fish and other things.
Right. We do have 2 biologists who are looking at the review, but that we could use more, because I think the people who look at it and understand, what to piece out and what, makes sense and what doesn't make sense is going to be the most helpful. So we definitely could use more help. Where we're kind of lacking right now is we really don't have a lot of folks focused on the cultural resources.
Yeah, Native American and archaeological.
Yes, so that is an area, we've got some feelers out, but that hasn't come through yet. So that's definitely an area of need.
The tribes, I went along on a demonstration of this a few years ago, but I believe it was Sequan or Manzanita. they have access to dog teams. They're actually trained to detect ancient remains. In other words, my understanding is they won't alert on, say, a recent, body, but if something's been there for thousands of years, these dogs can actually detect it. And the demonstration I went along on, they were absolutely accurate in finding some that were in the path of Sunrise Power Link, and the result was SDG&E had to go overhead for a stretch instead of underground for a stretch because of the the resources that were found there. The whole
Miriam, at least one of the tribes, I'll leave the name out right now because I don't want to put anybody on record in case it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
But we are going back to them because one of the tribes did indicate early on they're going to be very engaged on this. And most recently they did say they hope to respond in writing with their concerns by the deadline. But I am asking them if they can't do it, at least they could suggest someone who might be able to help with those cultural resources piece. So I mean so that's something, as Elizabeth said, that's something we do need.
Okay.
Interestingly, in the report, the environmental impact report so far, the author is saying that we are going to create an agreement with the tribe or tribes, and we will come up with a plan of how we'll ensure that we're properly treating anything that we find. But they don't get into any of the detail about what that agreement is, or has anyone even looked at such an agreement and weighed in. And so that's something I am finding incomplete. Well, they should have already done that.
Yeah, and there's such room for abuse. I recall in Akatia when they were building the wind farm, even though the tribes had brought these dogs out, they alerted, said there's ancient remains here. It went to the coroner's office, but he didn't get around to testing it until after the project was built and said, oh yeah, these were remains thousands of years old and they'd been just destroyed, So you're right. The devil's always in the details. It really does bring the county's whole process, I think, under scrutiny too. I will say that I have on past major projects heard from some wildlife experts, biologists, and at least one cultural resource consultant who were hired by these companies. And they told me they flat out, they were told to whitewash things. Several of them said they were threatened with being blackballed and not getting work in this field again, at least in this area, if they didn't say essentially what the developer wanted them to say, and ignoring certain things that might be project stoppers. So it's very troubling. I'm curious whether either of you want to weigh in on this process of having developers choose who will write the EIR and even hiring and paying for that. Is that something that maybe the county should reconsider?
I don't know that I can get into any firsthand knowledge of that or anything like that. I would like certainly we're talking about a developer consultant relationship there. I mean, I'd like to think that that the county is doing its diligence in its process, and certainly the scoping letter that the county released a couple years ago now, 2019, I guess more than a couple years ago, did do a very adequate job of saying, here's what the developer is going to have to do. And so, just because this EIR is out and we believe it clearly is unacceptable EIR, doesn't mean the county's necessarily going to buy into it. What it means is the county wants to hear from us now in the public about why it's unacceptable. Right. And so that's the important thing to me. And I'm going to rely on my hope that once all those comments are put out there and all those letters received, that the county is going to agree and say, yeah, we also reject this EIR as inadequate.
Yeah, we should make clear that the next step in the process, once an EIR is finalized, it would have to be approved by the county planning board, the planners, and then ultimately by the county board of supervisors. So there are still several levels of the review process to go through here. Can we recap?
Miriam, just to add, just to sort of piggyback on what Barry is saying, how crucial and important it is for everyone to weigh in and to send in their comments. It really does create an administrative record that is important because the developer then must respond to all of those valid concerns and comments. They must.
True.
And then if the project for some reason is approved, we also have on record our concerns. And so, there's the ability to, create lawsuits at that point.
Okay, so ultimately the courts could weigh in as well.
Well,
For those who may have,
and just I just want to add to that too, because you described the process well, Miriam. The EIR itself, even if approved, that doesn't approve the project. The EIR just is a piece of the overall project approval. And the EIR gets into environmental impacts. It doesn't get into other things we have concerned about, such as impact on property value, things like that. That it is ultimately potentially a political decision by the Board of Supervisors, down the road, not just the EIR itself. So we're going to stay on.
Yeah. Now, for those who may have tuned in late and missed the beginning, folks, you have until February 14th to submit public comments on the Cottonwood sand mining project. And there are 2 public hearings coming up. To recap, those are an in-person meeting on Wednesday, January 12th at 7 p.m. at Hillsdale Middle School. So that's in Rancho San Diego area?
Yes.
And then there's a virtual meeting for those who prefer to weigh in online on Wednesday, January 19th from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. And you can find links for how to email comments or details on those public meetings if you didn't catch all of that at eastcountymagazine.org. Just put in Cottonwood Sand Mine and you'll find it. And also at the Stop Cottonwood Sand Mine is it .org or .com?
Both will.
Both work. Okay. Website.
And Miriam, I'll just say it one more time. If people have trouble with any of that, they can just email also at info@stopcottonwoodsandmine.org with any questions they may have. Of course, I know I'm putting it on Elizabeth to have to answer those emails, but we do want to answer people's questions.
Yeah. And do you have any tips if people want to submit comments, what points they should keep in mind to maximize the effectiveness of those comments? In other words, as you pointed out, talking about something like property values may not affect an environmental impact report. What are the points people should keep in mind?
We've mentioned some of them, and I think everybody in their mind knows how it, depending on where they live, how this project's going to impact them. So if they just focus on those things that they think are going to have an impact on them, whether it's aesthetics or traffic or noise or air pollution, emergency response, that's a really good one that we talked about today. Elizabeth, anything? Wildlife, obviously, that's a huge one. People, so it goes back to me, it's the compatibility of the existing land uses and the impact to those who live in the area. So any impacts people see, it's okay to weigh in on those.
And we should point out that
I don't want to miss something you may have had.
Absolutely.
And I think I would agree that it doesn't have to be just what's listed in the EIR. It could be other things that we haven't thought about that people are concerned about, and they should definitely share those comments with the county.
Yeah, good.
And by the way, just because I said the EIR doesn't get into things like property values, if people have concerns about their property values and their quality of life in their existing neighborhoods and the impact to them, you can mention those things.
Those are certainly things planners and supervisors can weigh in on, even if it has nothing to do with the environment. So good point. Good point.
Miriam, just to let you know, and your listeners, that the Valley de Oro Community Planning Group will also hold a public meeting because part of the process.
When is that?
That's going to happen on Tuesday, February 1st.
Oh, okay.
At 7 p.m. And it's not absolutely confirmed, but most likely at Hillsdale Middle School, the same place as the previous county meeting. And there may be a presentation by the developer at that meeting. And there's been a subcommittee, which I'm also a part of, that has been focused on providing input to the Validate Oral Community Planning Group about the project so that they can make a recommendation to the county about whether to approve or not approve, or approved with, contingencies.
Very good. And we should note that the California Environmental Quality Act, better known as CEQA, actually requires that projects be compatible with the county's general plan as well as with community plans, such as the Valle de Oro plan. So that's a very important step in the process there. Is there anything else that either of you would like the public to know that we haven't already touched on?
Elizabeth, if I may, I mean, the only thing I noted is we were talking about, how we believe this report is inadequate, and but we've also talked about the complexity of the report, and so I want to make sure people who may pull up the report. I don't know that everybody is going to pull up the report and actually dig into it, but those that may see the complexity and think, well, this is really thorough and this is really detailed, right? Well, because of the length, but so to the untrained eye, maybe, oh, well, this is a really thorough and detailed report. Well, that doesn't mean all of that content in there really addresses the issues that need to be addressed. And that's why we believe it's inadequate, because we've dug into it enough, even though there's way more reading to do, to know that it's just glossing over and minimally addressing the issues to be able to get to project approval.
Right.
Without getting into real mitigation.
It's important to note that while one can argue whether mitigation can truly, adequately minimize harmful effects of any project, if an EIR finds that a project doesn't create any serious impacts, then they're not even going to be mitigated in any way. And again, for those who tuned in late, some of the things, let me read them, that this project was found to the draft EIR says would have no significant impacts from this project include air quality, energy, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards or hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, land use and planning, and transportation and traffic, also agriculture, forestry resources, geology and soils, mineral resources, population and housing, public services, recreation, utilities and service systems, and wildfires. And I don't think we have to be a rocket scientist to realize that a sand mining project on a river upstream from a federal wildlife preserve and close to many homes probably is going to have at least some impact on things like wildlife and water quality and air quality and transportation. So it's really important for everybody to dig in, look at this, or at least write to the planning folks or come to the hearings and let them know how this is going to affect you, what your concerns are. So I really want to thank you. We've been speaking with Elizabeth Urquhart and Barry Jantz from the Stop Cottonwood Sand Mine Group for taking the time to join us here today on the East County Magazine radio show on KNSJ 89.1 FM, Descanso.